Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Non Sequitur Nerds. Tonight, the laughter may never die, but unfortunately, some of our favorite comedians do. Tonight, we're going to be talking comedians who, unfortunately, have left us. But, as always, I'm Tim, joined by Ian. How's it going, buddy?
Well, capping off kind of a tragic week for us,
A
as
little
we're
bit,
talking
yeah.
about, this is a little bit more topical than what we typically do, but we did unfortunately lose the late, great Gilbert Gottfried this week, the immortal voice of Iago and the Affleck duck.
Yeah.
Two birds, weirdly enough.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I hadn't even thought of that.
things are going all right this week. Just been very busy with life and everything else going on, so
I hear
you
that.
know that that be the way it is sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. But,
But
I mean,
anyway,
life is what it is. There's not much we can do about it one way or the other.
right, exactly. But well, we can celebrate some of the lives of the people that made us laugh the hardest
Oh,
and the
absolutely.
most. So, looking back, this year has been actually kind of a rough year on older comedians.
Yeah.
Obviously, we lost Gilbert Gottfried kind of unexpectedly, actually.
Yeah.
That really came out of nowhere.
Well, I
But
guess he had been ill for a while.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if they put publicly what his illness was, but he had been ill.
Yeah, it was a form of MS, I believe, is what I heard. It wasn't like full-blown MS,
Yeah.
multiple sclerosis for those who aren't aware. Um, but it was like a variant of that, and he'd been
Huh.
battling that for a little while. Is
I
what
wasn't aware of that. Huh.
Yeah, I think he was pretty silent about it. It wasn't something that he broadcast or really talked about at all, which is perfectly fine. We don't
Yeah.
need to know everything about
Yeah.
celebrities and whatnot. They're people too.
Well,
Like they
exactly. I
deserve to
mean,
have their private lives.
yeah, just like you say, just because they're in the limelight doesn't mean that you have to know everything they do 24 hours a day. I mean, not a comedian, but Chadwick Boseman. He
Yeah.
famously had been battling cancer for years while filming all the Marvel movies, and his own solo film in Black Panther. And there were only a obscenely small number of people that actually knew about it. General public had no idea about it, and he didn't show any signs of illness really. So,
Yeah, I mean they do very well, and people are allowed to have their private lives. So there's
absolutely.
a lot of folks that do very well to hide it, and some of the folks we're going to talk about tonight also fall in that camp. But going back to Gilbert Gottfried, I think I was originally introduced to him again as Iago the parrot
Same, same.
from the Aladdin movies and TV show. Um, he went on to voice that character for a long time, and then obviously we saw him, appear in other things throughout the years, and had a very iconic voice. Um, but my understanding was that was part of his shtick, like that was his
Yeah,
act.
his his
He didn't
his normal
actually
speaking,
speak like
yeah,
that.
his normal speaking voice, he just sounds like any other dude. That iconic voice of his was entirely an act. And probably like one of my favorite things, it was a super short thing that I ever saw him do was it was like a parody commercial for Audible. And those of you that aren't familiar with Audible, it's effectively books on tape in the digital age. But he did a fake Audible commercial of 50 Shades of Grey as read by Gilbert Gottfried. If you get a chance, look it up. I'm sure it's on YouTube. Um, it is just I laugh every time I hear it. I mean, and now it's gonna hit a little differently now, but like that was
Right.
always one of my favorite like bits he did.
Yeah, and he was known for a he was really kind of known for his like raunchy humor. Like he was
Yeah, he
very much
was.
he was very much part of the old school like Friars Club roasts and
Oh yeah.
Comedy Central roasts, and he was always one of the more raunchy the comedians.
Yep.
Famously part of Bob Saget's The Aristocrats. Sorry, Aristocats is different.
A
Aristocrats.
little bit of a difference
Um,
there.
Right, which for those of you that don't know, it is basically the whole shtick is comedians try to tell the absolute dirtiest, raunchiest version of the same joke.
Yeah.
And so it was a whole movie, and it was Bob Saget's very famous for it. But there's many other comedians that were on there. So yeah, it was a shame that that we lost Gilbert. He'll definitely be missed.
Oh yeah.
He wasn't quite in the limelight as much lately, but he'd
Yeah.
actually, been talking about doing another tour. So,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so may he rest in peace, Gilbert, and thank you for all the laughs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, we've had, you and I kind of alluded to this, that like even in our lifetimes and a little bit before, there were comedians who were very iconic that even people who like had never gone to any of their comedy shows or anything like that would be familiar with. And one of the earliest ones, looking at my notes here, it was a couple years before our time, but one that you and I know are both very familiar with, John Belushi.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
absolutely, famous for Animal House is one of his big ones. Brother to Jim Belushi. Yeah, he's Jim Belushi. I mean, that's can't really say much.
He sells pot now.
I'm not surprised. But
No, I mean he has a TV show about it. Like he apparently grows pot and sells pot now.
interesting. But
Yes.
John, the arguably more famous Belushi, was also famous for being the other half of Dan Aykroyd's Blues Brothers, another
Right.
very successful comedy at the time. Looking at my notes, he was 33 when he passed away. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he was younger than you and I are. I mean, that's
Yep.
like
And
I remember like
and he,
watching those movies and like he just seemed so much older than that. Not in a bad way, but he just seemed an older actor. But yeah, like when I was looking all this up, I didn't realize that he had actually died younger than us. So I mean, way too
yeah, I
soon for
mean
him.
it's those years of the hard partying. I mean, they really do take a
Yeah.
toll on you.
Yep.
And John was very famous for
Yeah, he
drugs and
was.
alcohol.
Yes, he was.
He
Drugs, alcohol,
was
food, and food.
Yeah, and again, hilarious. If you ever have an opportunity to go back and watch some of his old SNL specials or SNL bits and things like that, he
Yeah.
was part of the probably considered one of the original golden ages of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It was just so funny, and unfortunately, because he died so young, his movie appearances were very limited.
Yeah.
Didn't have a whole lot of them, except for some of the ones that we had just mentioned. But
Right.
he was one that's it's really hard to think about comedy without thinking about John Belushi. And a lot of younger
Especially in that
folks.
era.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And a lot of younger folks these days probably won't have as much of. They probably wouldn't be able to recognize him as much, which is kind of sad. But Animal House is iconic as far as
Oh,
like
absolutely.
the frat boy party, National Lampoon type movies go. So it's hard to even nowadays. 30, 40 years later, Animal House still holds a special place in people's hearts.
It's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. Saw some careers and some appearances from some absolutely great actors. Tom Hulce is in it, who famously was in Amadeus, playing as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Amadeus,
Um,
Amadeus.
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 Falco.
Falco, who's not a comedian but has also passed away.
Right. Then there was who else was the guy that plays Flounder? His name escapes me right now. The
Flounder from Little Mermaid.
no.
Oh,
His
I'm like
character
that. I'm
his
like,
character was Flounder, and he was the larger, heavyset guy with the kind of the chubby face. His character's name was Flounder. I can't remember the actor's name at this point. He passed away not that long ago,
yeah,
actually.
that escapes me as well, unfortunately.
But he had a very iconic voice. He appeared in a lot of kids' cartoons. I believe he was in Babylon 5 for many seasons. I think throughout the whole run of the show, as one of the more beloved characters of that show. But anyway, yeah, I unfortunately can't remember his name right now.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, kind of coming back to a little bit, kind of a person that transcends the older, our generation and kind of some of the newer generations, and folks may or may not recognize him, as obviously we mentioned him earlier, Bob Saget.
Yep.
He passed away earlier this year, unfortunately, due to a head injury and probably a more underlying problem that was there beforehand.
Okay.
The head injury just exacerbated it.
Yeah.
Basically, kind of like a brain aneurysm type thing. Many people originally speculated that it was drugs or alcohol related because Bob Saget was known to be it was one of the original party boys
Yeah.
from the '90s and early aughts, but he'd been clean for several
A
years.
while, yeah.
Yeah, he'd been clean for several years. So and he was actually on tour when he passed, which was unfortunate. But I always know Bob Saget from Full House and America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah, I'll say America's Funniest Home Videos. I think was a bigger, like, I didn't dislike Full House, but America's Funniest Home Videos was my jam back in the day. I mean that, like, no matter how many times you watch, like, I think Simpsons did it best. No matter how many times you watch a guy get hit in the crotch, it's gonna be funny. I'm sorry,
Yep. Yep, exactly. And again, Bob Saget's been on multiple other things since then. He reprised his role as Danny Tanner
Yep.
on the Fuller House
Yep.
series, making guest appearances. Famously was the narrator from How I Met Your Mother.
Yep.
Playing the part of older, whatever the hell the character's name was.
I never got into that show, really.
I never did either. On Entourage, Surviving Suburbia, Half Baked, again was in several other shows, movies, and like I said earlier, pioneered the Aristocrats and assembled all those comedians to keep telling the same jokes, just
Yep.
trying to one up each other. So yeah, it was tragic when he passed away because he was kind of an icon of my childhood.
Well, it kind of, like you said, it really came out of nowhere. Nobody was really expecting anything like that. But I mean, again, it goes back to what we said at the top of the show. A lot, like some of these celebrities, it's very well known why they passed away. Others, something that nobody expected it. But that's just kind of the way life is, unfortunately.
Right. Yep. So, who else was on your list?
Well, I had, like, I kind of, my list kind of goes in chronological order, unfortunately, by death. So next one, and another, big star of the '80s, Andy Kaufman. Who, I mean, they had that whole movie Man on the Moon starring Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman, and like for me, like Man on the Moon, that was my introduction into Andy. Because again, he died not just shortly before I was born. So I mean, even if it would have been a year afterwards, I still would have been too young to even know what I was watching. But he was kind of, for lack of a better description, almost like Golden Age Tom Green. He did stuff to shock people, but not in the way that Tom Green does it. Like Andy would, like, he had a whole run in the wrestling world, famously feuding with Jerry Lawler, who, like, later, like, Jerry came out and said, no, the entire thing was Andy's idea. The whole thing was a bit, and I loved it. I mean, he was one of the first, like, mainline celebrities to get into the world of wrestling, and, like, people, like, wrestling fans hated him, but he was playing it up like that. I mean, it got him notoriety. His name became a household thing, not just from that, but from a lot of the other things he did. I mean, famously, he was in Taxi, playing as Latka, which I mean, that's kind of his iconic role.
Well, I mean, when you unfortunately die at 35 years old,
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I mean, he's another one that died pretty young.
Yeah, his was not really a condition of hard partying though. His was lung cancer, unfortunately. You could attribute that to many different things. It could have been natural lung cancer. It could have been caused by smoking. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
So can't really cast too many stones there. But yeah, I mean, I never really saw a lot of Andy's stuff. I never actually saw Man on the Moon either.
Oh, phenomenal film!
Yeah, I've heard it's really good, and I'm a fan of Jim Carrey, so it's on my eventual to watch list. Just
right.
not something that I'm jumping to go watch.
Go watch it right now.
Yeah. Um, anyway, yeah. So, yeah, talking about older, celebrities from a bygone era, one that I can think of, that I think everybody loved was John Candy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Um,
he was so lovable in everything he did,
yeah, not only was he just lovable in everything that he did, but I mean, if you look at, you know,
He's actually one that was
oh,
on my list too.
yeah, I mean, you look at some of his iconic roles and everything else. I mean, Spaceballs, Uncle Buck,
Yep.
like,
See,
and I love comedy parodies and Mel Brooks movie. I mean, Mel Brooks movies. I love Mel
yeah.
Brooks. I love Mel Brooks movies. He is still alive, by
Yeah,
the way, folks. Tim and I
yeah.
were actually talking about this earlier, before we started recording the show. He's 95 years old, and
Yeah.
he's set to star in a movie coming up.
I think it's called
Um,
Bad Guys by DreamWorks,
yeah,
which
yeah.
I saw a preview of in the theater today. I went and saw Sonic 2, which is really good, by the way. I really enjoyed it. But like it was showing off the cast, and I'm like, Mel Mel Brooks is alive? Like I knew he was old. I actually thought I thought Mel Brooks had passed away a couple years ago. But no, he's still alive and kicking at 95. So I mean, he's doing something
Yeah,
right.
yeah, still alive, a kicking. Smart as a whip. Has all of his faculties. Is doing very well.
Right.
And is actually, for a little bit of trivia, for you folks. He is one of a handful, literal handful of people, that has won all four of the major awards.
Really.
It's yes. He has won an Emmy, a Tony, a Grammy, and an Oscar.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, like his. I know we're talking about somebody who's still alive, but his repertoire of stuff that he's done is incredibly vast. Whether he's starred, directed, produced, whatever have you, he's done it all. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. He's done it all, and he's iconic, and some of
yeah,
his stuff is just ancient too. If you think about, I mean, the
yeah,
producers that came out in
a while
60.
ago. Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, Mel Brooks has been around for a long time. He's an institution of Hollywood.
yeah.
But anyway, moving on back to Mr. John Candy. I mean, Spaceballs is still one of my absolute favorite movies. It's just so funny, and
Yep.
some of the humor in that probably escapes some people nowadays. But
Yeah.
just it's the sight gags or the one-liners that you blink and you miss it type
Yep.
thing, and
Yep.
uh,
It's such a quotable film, though. Spaceballs.
keep firing, assholes.
Have you found anything yet? We ain't found shit.
Shit.
Comb the desert.
You think we're being too literal? No, they said comb the desert, so we're combing it.
Comb the desert. Well, what are we watching here? Now, what do you mean? Like that whole scene where they're fast, they literally fast forward through the film that they're making to figure out where the good guys are going. That scene there is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a John Candy film as well, playing the Chewbacca parody Barf. And like John Candy again, like, and you can't watch a movie he's in and not smile at least a little. Like even movies like Home Alone, where he played the traveling polka band member. Even in that, like his character's supposed to be annoying. You can't help but smile at least a little at that. It's just
Yeah, I mean, he's endearing.
yes,
Some of his movies that he did with other actors, like Steve Martin. What was it? Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
yep,
Another one of those iconic movies. Uncle Buck, we mentioned.
yep,
One of my absolute favorite John Candy movies.
yep.
It's just so funny and so entertaining.
Man, Uncle Buck. I haven't seen that one in a while, but I mean that is an entertaining movie. Let me tell you.
Yeah, because it's John Candy being lovable but being an asshole at the same time.
Yep, a lovable asshole, just like you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even his appearance in National Lampoon's Vacation, the original one, as the security guard at Wally World.
Yep.
It's a bit part, but it was so funny. But yeah, so we he's definitely one that died young, 43 from a heart attack.
Yeah.
unfortunately, but he'll certainly be missed.
Yeah, but now I mean we're kind of getting into the territory where these are actors that have died in our lifetimes when we were old enough to remember them, or at least they have more film appearances or more recent film appearances where we're a little bit more familiar with them.
Yeah.
Like kind of the polar end of the heavyset comedians, Chris Farley, who was kind of the I don't want to say he was the evil John Candy, but I mean they were a big divide between those two. I mean Chris was more, I'd say he was kind of definitely one of the pioneers of the more modern era of SNL.
Yeah.
But I mean like famously Tommy Boy, he was in that.
Black Sheep.
Black Sheep. What was the one where he was
Beverly Hills Ninja?
Beverly Hills Ninja. Yep. That's
one of my
that
favorites.
Is such I love that. I couldn't remember the name, but I love that one. Like
yeah, and Chris Farley, famous, for being friends with David Spade and Adam Sandler, and in that era of Saturday Night Live, was very much physical comedy. One of the absolute best bits of SNL, and you can go out and find it on YouTube of all time. I know which
one you're going to talk
about.
Is
Chris Farley and Patrick Swayze doing a Chippendales audition.
Yep.
And they're the last two. They're the last two people to audition, and you've got Chris Farley, who's a heavier set guy.
Yes.
And then you've got Patrick Swayze in his prime.
Yeah.
Dirty Dancing was just ripped and very lean, and they're both shirtless, and they're dancing, and Farley's keeping up with Swayze and doing dancing and whatnot.
I'm gonna have to put a GIF of it right here. I mean,
he's just, and it's such an iconic dance too that they immortalize it. They made the ogres do the dance in World of Warcraft. So like the ogres they will do like the Chris Farley Chippendales dance.
Oh my god, I'd forgotten about that.
And it's also famous because it was such a funny skit that the other actors in it were breaking character and laughing. Like I can't remember who it was, but they're literally sitting there with their hands over their mouths, like
trying not to laugh at this.
Right. Mike Myers is in the skit. He's literally looking away, like trying not to die laughing. Yep. And something that most people don't know is actually Chris Farley was slated to be the original voice of Shrek.
Yes, he was. Yep.
And he had actually voiced most of the lines, but they didn't feel right, like doing it, and they still had more recording to do. So they brought in Mike Myers, who they just re-recorded everything with Mike Myers and created an iconic Shrek character with Shrek as Mike Myers. But I feel like it would have been an entirely different movie had Farley finished out and done the voice of Shrek. So
a little bit, yeah. Well, I mean, even they even tweaked Shrek's design slightly in the finalized version of the film. He originally looked much more like Chris Farley in the face. But I mean, it was 97 when he passed away from a drug overdose. I mean, again, he was kind of still very much that Hollywood party mentality. Heavily. Well, I mean,
the best way that you can describe him is he was the new Belushi.
Yeah, very much so.
He looked up to, he idolized Belushi. And unfortunately, he emulated him in every way possible, including the heavy drinking, the drugs, and, it was very unfortunate when he passed away.
Yeah. It was. Still is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate that all of them passed away. But, another one of Belushi's, not Belushi, I'm sorry, Farley's peers, though, was Phil Hartman, who... was also on SNL, very famous for being on news radio. One of my favorite roles of his was his character in Small Soldiers. It's just one of those iconic roles. Famously played the voice of Troy McClure.
Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from such other Simpsons episodes as the one I was in last week and the one before that.
Right, exactly. Yep. And unfortunately...
he actually had a lot of characters on Simpsons.
Yeah, he did. He played a lot of parts on
Let's
Simpsons.
see,
He played a lot of
Lionel
things.
Hutz. He was the attorney as
Yes.
well. Yep. But I mean,
Yep.
yeah,
Lionel Hutz.
he did a good amount of voice work as well, apart from his comedy. I mean, he had a radio voice. I mean, very much a radio voice.
Right.
Um,
Which is funny because he again played on a show called News Radio.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Perfect fit though, you know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was he had kind of been a bit of a party boy, but really backed it down when he got married and started having kids and whatnot. And unfortunately was didn't die of natural
Yeah.
causes. He was unfortunately killed by his wife
Yeah.
in a murder-suicide. So not to be too macabre and dark about it, but he was unfortunately taken from us way too early. We definitely miss Phil, and I would have loved to have seen him do,
More.
just thinking about the stuff that he could have done and the things that he was so um, the opportunities that would have been out there
Yeah.
to have him around. So it's very tragic and unfortunate, but we do miss him and yeah. So who else is on your list, Timothy?
Well, I had this kind of jumping forward a little bit. Bernie Mac,
Hmm.
a stand-up comedian that especially like in the early 2000s, like everybody knew who he was. Um, Very charismatic. I mean, he was in Ocean's 11. Um,
The
but I mean,
Bernie Mac show.
the Bernie Mac show. I mean, his own self-titled show. But I mean, I think he was most well known for his stand-up routine, which I mean, I know like Comedy Special back in the day ran like there was a new stand-up special for somebody like every 2 hours. But I remember
Mhm.
seeing like he had quite a bit of them. Um, he just had a very easily like you could tell just from listening that you were listening to a Bernie Mac special. Um,
Right.
I mean, just the charisma. Like I know a lot of people weren't super big fans of him, but like his charisma, you couldn't deny that. Like he knew how to work the crowd, which I mean
Hmm.
like a lot of stand up comedians, well for all stand up comedians, reading the crowd is a big thing you've got to do. You've got to know like what jokes will resonate with this crowd. What kind of comedy, how far you go with interacting with the crowd. And Bernie seemed to, for the most part, know how to work that very well. So I mean, he's very talented. Um, he actually was one of the first ones on our list to live well past their 30s at this point. He was 50. He passed away in 2008, so not super long ago. But it was actually complications from pneumonia. Um, which I mean, something that like even something like pneumonia in this day and age that can still kill you. Um, but yeah,
Well, I mean, famously, Brittany Snow passed away of pneumonia, and then her husband not that much later. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that can still get you.
yep,
So get treated when you where you can.
absolutely, yeah. Well, who do you
Um,
got next on yours, Ian?
well,
I know there's one that you and I both have on our list coming up.
right. Yeah, I think we'll kind of save that one a little bit, but
Yeah.
one that passed away just this year was Louis Anderson. If you
Yeah. Yep.
remember Louis Anderson, my first introduction to him was the Fox Kids show Life with Louis.
Yep.
When they showed like a little kid version of Louis Anderson that
Yep.
looked like Louis
It
Anderson
was
that was
just
played by Louis
Louis, but
Anderson.
short. It was literally that's
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah, I mean, Louis Anderson was, he's very well known for, being of a larger stature. And as funny as the man was, I'll say this, he was ugly as sin. Um, just not a very attractive man at all.
Yeah.
Passed away of large B-cell lymphoma this year. He was
Yeah.
68 years old. Actually, just a couple of weeks after Bob Saget did, so it was kind of a 1-2 punch there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he'd been around for a long time. Really kind of started off, got his career in 1981. Did a stint on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Appeared in, several movies and other roles. Was in Coming to America in the 1980s. And then he also had several TV shows. I think there was one I can't remember what it was called, but famously plays like a woman in it.
Yeah,
Baskets. Baskets is the name of the show. Sorry, I was reading through some information about Louis here. But yeah, played the character of Christine Baskets in that show, and he actually won an Emmy for that show.
oh
So
wow.
yeah, I mean, he was very very prolific up throughout his entire career. So
Yeah.
yeah. What about you?
Well, one that is near and dear to my heart, in 2014, not the one that you're thinking of, we lost Harold Ramis, which anybody
Mm,
that knows me, he's famously known for playing Egon Spengler in the Ghostbusters. But beyond that, he was a writer for, let's see, things such as Groundhog Day, Stripes, which he was also in as well. Um, he co-wrote Ghostbusters as well as Ghostbusters 2. I'm just like kind of scrolling down the list here. Let's see. Rover Dangerfield, which I mean, we talked about Rodney Dangerfield. He was a writer on that. Yes, Ian?
Ye Caddyshack?
Well, yeah, I was getting to that. It's on my
I
list.
I mean, you're naming up all these other things, and I'm just going, you're missing one of the best ones on there.
Well, I mean, he had a hand in Caddyshack 2. Gosh, what else? Meatballs 3. um,
I mean,
but
it's very obviously
yeah,
very famously tied
yeah.
with Bill Murray to a lot of projects.
Yes, very much
Um,
so.
you know, they were kind of a dynamic duo from back in the '80s and '90s, and you know they did quite a lot together. So
Well, I mean, heck, one that I didn't even know here. He directed 4 episodes of The Office, the U.S. version.
interesting.
Yeah. See, I mean, of course, like Ian said, he directed Caddyshack,
I
National
think he helped
Lampoon.
write it too a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
think he has a writing credit there.
see, Groundhog Day, Multiplicity, National Lampoon's Vacation. Let's see. I mean, he also did. He had a lot of cameos as himself as well, in
Hmm.
various things. So I mean, he had quite a bit of a career. I mean, he was known for being more of kind of the deadpan character. Especially like if you look at Egon, Egon was just very much matter of fact about stuff, but it was his presentation as that just deadpan kind of guy is what did it for him. That I mean, a lot of his characters were very similar. Not even gonna lie, but it was his own iconic brand of comedy. I mean, and
Yeah.
not even when he was behind the camera, you can definitely see his directing style in those films plus many more that I had mentioned. Um, and I mean, again, my first experience with him was as Egon in Ghostbusters, but he's so much more than that. And I mean, the new Ghostbusters film, famously, I think we're past the statute of limitations on spoilers. The whole film is centered around Egon's family and how they are coping with his legacy. Um, so I mean, it's nice to see that even to this day, I mean, mainly again, he is primarily known for Ghostbusters in this day and age, but he has so many iconic pieces of cinema, television, everything in his repertoire.
Well, I mean, we
For me
can't really
personally, will be
talk.
missed a lot.
Right. We can't really talk, and jumping ahead a little bit, we can't really talk about, Ghostbusters and whatnot without addressing the fact that this year we also lost Ivan Reitman.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, we did. And
you know,
another a
very
great director.
yes, very famous director, very great director. His son, Jason Reitman, I believe, directed the new Ghostbusters movie.
Yep.
Worked very closely with his dad, and Jason had mostly been doing kind of like smaller, more indie type films
Yeah.
up until that point. But felt like he could really do the film justice. And Tim and I have seen it multiple times, and we
Yes.
saw it in
Yes.
theaters twice, I believe,
Yep.
together. So, but anyway,
Once
once
together, but
together.
I saw it a second
Yeah,
time. Yep.
I did as well. I went
Yep.
with my brother and his friend.
Which
And
fun trivia. Jason in Ghostbusters 2, near the beginning of the film, Ray and Winston go to a birthday party, and there's a little kid that walks up to him and says, "My dad says you guys are full of crap." That's Jason Reitman.
yeah,
Which there
yeah,
is a fun fan theory that he is playing Walter Peck, the EPA agent's son. It's a fan theory that he is Walter Peck's son, which
mhm.
I don't know if it's canon or not, but I fully subscribe to that fan theory. It is canon up here.
It's headcanon.
Exactly.
Um, Yeah, so I mean, Ivan Reitman, it was yeah, an icon in Hollywood. We're talking about comedians and whatnot, but we can't mention some of these great movies and whatnot without referencing Ivan, just simply because of um,
Sorry, Mike. I opened a can of soda and it almost just completely exploded all over me.
that would have been entertaining.
Oh yeah.
Um, but one of it's kind of an unsung movie, but one of my favorites is favorite Ivan Reitman movies is Evolution.
Yes. Let go of my friend, you giant sphincter. I
Yeah.
actually watched that just a couple months ago. I think it was on Netflix. I was just like scrolling through trying to find something to fall asleep to, and I'm like, Evolution. I haven't seen that in a while. I'll pop it on. I can fall asleep to that. I watched the whole thing.
Yeah. It was, critically it kind of it flopped. I think it made its money back and maybe then some, but it wasn't exactly a very popular movie, but
Yeah.
it was kind of almost like Ghostbusters with aliens, really.
Yeah.
But
Ghostbusters meets X Files, and it had David Duchovny in it. So
right, exactly. And Gillian Moore, it was such a Sean William Scott.
yep,
It was Dan Aykroyd,
yep.
Ted Levine. Just a fantastic cast, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
just such a. I always enjoyed it. It was just such a funny movie to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, so it was great. I always fondly remember that one, and I'll pick it up and watch it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
once a year, once every couple of years, or
Yep.
something like that. But
Yep.
um, anyway, but as we start nearing, I think towards the end of this, there's one. There are many comedians out there that we would love to be able to go in more depth with and recognize. Some of them are actors playing more comedic parts. Others are true, comedians and whatnot. Actually, there's two people that I do want to reference here as we start to wrap up. The first being the iconic and immortal, in at least in my heart, Carrie Fisher. Obviously,
Yeah.
she passed away several years ago, but many people don't know this. She did do stand-up comedy. She had stand-up comedy specials.
Yep.
She did a lot of comedy. She worked more behind the scenes in Hollywood. She was usually doing things like screenwriting, script writing. She did some directing. She was very, very known for script doctoring as well.
Yep.
She rewrote a lot of the movie scripts for famous movies like Sister Act and Outbreak.
Yep.
But obviously, to people like Tim and I, she was our immortal space princess.
Yep.
Carrie Fisher as Leia Organa. Um, it, it, it was really, really tragic when she passed away. So we definitely put a shout out to
Yeah.
her because
Absolutely.
there will never be another Carrie Fisher, and definitely love her to death.
Oh
But
yeah.
as we move on to our last comic of this series, probably the one that is one of the ones that is closest to Tim and I's hearts is the infallible and immortal Robin Williams.
Absolutely.
Um, that man probably single-handedly made my childhood with all of his iconic roles.
Yes.
Mrs. Doubtfire, the genie in Aladdin, Good
Like
Morning Vietnam,
Patch Adams. I mean, that's
Patch
yeah.
Adams, Mork, obviously from Mork and Mindy, one of his more famous and original roles,
Yep.
but was just very well known for his presence, his impromptu abilities.
Yes.
The man was legendary as far as being an improv comic.
I
Um,
will say though, his stand-up comedy is some of the raunchiest stand-up I have ever heard, and I am 200% for it.
yes.
Like the first time, it was actually our friend Daniel. The first time I ever saw, excuse me, any of his stand-up was with our buddy Dan. And like I'm expecting like family friendly stuff because that's primarily what I had been seeing at that time. and we watched that together. And I was in tears laughing over just
Yes.
how absolutely phenomenal he was as a stand-up artist. I mean, it is night and day from his Disney to his stand-up. I mean, you can't get much more different. Um,
Yeah,
but
some
just absolutely just iconic, you know?
yeah, and you know, they're famous, so famous for his improv that he's legendary in Hollywood because they had to they said that had they taken like all of the improv that he had done for the character of Genie in the original Aladdin, it was like an hour and a half
Yeah,
of just like
just him.
improv, like just him improving for that character. So they were just like picking out the pieces that they could use, and some of the stuff he did, you know, more raunchy jokes, kind of break up some of the humor and things like that. They obviously couldn't use, but you know, it was very famous as well for and as Mrs. Doubtfire and whatnot. But was very always careful to keep the comedy clean when he was around kids. You know, would not, you know, swear or tell dirty jokes or anything like that around the kids. And the eldest child, I can't remember who the name of the actress, but she was actually, um, she was expelled from her school because during the shooting of Mrs. Doubtfire because she was doing homeschooling, like schooling in the trailer,
Yeah.
and the school board basically said, you know, we don't feel like you can get the level of education, so you either have to come back or we're kicking you out. And Robin Williams actually wrote a letter to the school board on her behalf, pretty much kind of like chewing them out a little bit, but very
Good.
nicely,
Yeah.
and telling them, you know, ultimately they still didn't take her back. You know, she wound up getting a private tutor and being tutored on set
Okay.
and whatnot. But you know, he was very much a person that would stand up for, you know, for other people, and a nerd just like us. You know,
Yeah,
we've
I was just gonna
mentioned this
mention that. Yep.
before. Yeah, you know, he loved Evangelion.
Yep.
He played World of Warcraft. You know, his daughter is named Zelda after Princess Zelda.
Yep.
You know,
Exactly.
Zelda Williams, and she's also one of the nicest people in the world. And his
Oh
son, I can't
yes.
remember his son's name. He's actually, I believe, a social worker and pastor for
Oh
prison
wow.
inmates.
Oh.
So
Huh.
yeah, he does like outreach
Yeah.
and social work for inmates.
Huh.
So yeah. But as you know, Tim was saying, you know, we've had many a laugh together and separately over Robin
Oh
Williams. I
yeah.
mean, just dying of laughter, just a horse from, you
Yes.
know, can't
Yes.
talk from how much we've laughed.
Yep.
You know, watching his stuff. So um, yeah,
It's always, always enjoyable. No matter how many times I've seen any of his movies or stand up, always enjoyable.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Death to Smoochie was another one that
Yep.
was one of those definitely not a kids movie, and it's become kind of a cult classic type movie.
Yeah.
What was the movie that he did with Nathan Lane? Was it The Birdcage, I think?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, where he plays Nathan Lane's husband. I guess that, you know, they're gay.
I think so. I think
Yeah,
so.
they're gay movie producers and whatnot, and they have a son that they have to pretend like they're not gay because he's getting married or something like that.
Yeah.
So
That's one that I'm familiar with, but I don't think I've seen it.
yeah, it's just such a funny movie. And again, anything that Robin touched
Yeah.
was funny, for the most part. I mean, he did actually do some more serious roles
Yeah.
towards the end of his career. Um, so you know, there was stuff that um Insomnia, I believe, was one of them. Oh, I mean, how could I forget um, uh, uh, Goodwill Hunting?
Yep.
Um, I mean, that was the movie that he won the Oscar for.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
he was versatile. I mean, he was most known for his comedy, but he was incredibly versatile in his acting.
mhm, yeah. Plays
I mean,
Teddy Roosevelt in the Night at the Museum movies.
played Pan in Hook, which was always
Yes.
I always loved that film.
Yep. Pan and Hook was in Happy Feet, Man of the Year, RV, Robots.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, that one was one that I really enjoyed. Bicentennial Man as
Oh,
well.
yeah,
That
yep.
was one of his
Oh,
more serious
yeah. Like
serious movies to start
that
with.
one made me cry. I mean, that was
It,
a
it
very emotional
yeah,
movie.
yeah, it did me too, to me as well. Yes, it was The Birdcage was the
Okay,
one that I was thinking of. So,
gotcha.
but yeah, I mean, he's been in so many different things. It's crazy to
Yeah,
think of, not having him. There's just so much that I remember. Do
yeah.
you remember the movie Toys?
Yes. Yep.
That movie actually
That
kind of
was a
like scared me when I
bizarre
was.
movie, but
Yes, it was.
yeah.
That one kind of scared me when I was a kid. I'm not gonna lie.
I think it did for
But
a lot of people just because of how weird it was.
right, yeah, exactly. So, um, but yeah, so that'll probably, I think, do it for us tonight. I think we've
Okay.
covered a lot of people, and there's certainly a lot more that we can cover,
Oh,
and we may
absolutely.
cover them in a future episode. So kind of stay tuned as we talk about who else is out there that maybe we've lost too soon, and we'd like to put a spotlight on them, and that's kind of what we hoped we do tonight. While they are no longer with us, we hope that we've given you kind of a spotlight that you can go and check out some of their materials.
Oh, yes, for sure.
And all of them are readily available out there,
Oh yeah.
and take a look, and you can see just how amazing these people were, and just how they transformed comedy, especially if you start looking at things chronologically, and you
Yeah.
can see the influences of each other as comedy has progressed and grown.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that'll go ahead and do it for us then tonight.
I think
We
so.
thank you for joining us as always. You can catch us on anchor.fm, which feeds out to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, several other podcasting sites. Catch the recorded videos of us on youtube.com/non sequitur nerds. You can also find us on social media, twitter.com @non sequitur nerd, facebook.com/non sequitur nerds, and occasionally catch us live streaming on twitch.tv/non sequitur nerd. We should probably
Just
do that
probably do
sometime.
that sometime.
We keep talking. We either need to do it or I need to stop pitching it.
Right.
So anyway, I think that'll go ahead and wrap up for us.
I think so.
So thank you. We hope you have a fun and fantastic day, evening, night, morning, wherever time it is for you. And don't forget to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for the non sequitur nerds, as always, I'm Ian.
And I'm Tim. Night, everybody.